All right, so 16 years ago, we started NVIDIA, and the insight that we had. Some people call it vision. Vision's an awfully big word to me. Vision's an awfully big word to me because I believe, first of all, vision matters. Let me tell you that vision matters, and I'll help you understand that in a second. But I like to use the word perspective because it makes it possible for anyone to have one. When you say vision, it feels like only a few selected visionaries of the world can have one. But everyone has a perspective, and that's in fact all vision means. That you see the world in a way that is either different or otherwise, okay, than somebody else. And you see opportunities that I think that you believe are particularly important to go in and address, that you can address in a particular way. And so perspective, our perspective at the time, this is 1993, you guys won't remember this, but the PC was Windows 3.1, CD-ROM was about to be introduced. There were no PCs with networks. Wireless technology, if somebody said radio, I think the word that would come to mind is FM radio. And so wireless technology didn't exist. The fastest microprocessor in the world was a 66 megahertz 46DX2, and I don't think any of you would even use it in your tennis shoes today. And we would run our computers with that. And the PC was becoming used for desktop or for office automation. Our perspective was that this particular device was going to be unique in the sense that it has the ability to run programs. And what if we gave it the benefit of running 3D graphics programs so that you could explore new worlds, play games, play games. And so we started a company, and the business plan basically read something like this. We're going to take technology that was available only in the most expensive workstations. We're going to try to reinvent the technology and make it inexpensive. And the killer app was video games. And so I took this idea to Sand Hill Road, and they told me there was no video game market. People don't start companies to play games. And my parents, I remember calling my mom and telling her that I'm going to start this company, and she says, what do you guys do? And I said, we build these things called 3D graphics chips, and people would use them to play games. And then she said, why don't you go get a job? Now of course, games was we believe going to be a very large part of the marketplace. Now we had that perspective for very obvious reasons. We grew up in the video game generation. I was the video game generation. I was the beginning of the video game generation. And so the entertainment value of video games, computer games, was very obvious to me. And I could imagine how it could be a very large market and a very large industry. For a lot of the people that were older, that sensibility didn't exist. And so notice, I just described to you a perspective about the world that we had that is apparently, obviously now true, because video games is the world's largest digital media industry today. It is apparently true, and yet at the time, our common sense was unique. Nobody would have created the technology, nobody would have created a company with the sole purpose of building technology to make video games possible. And so that was our perspective. Now we felt that video games would of course fuel the technology development, but you could use this technology for a whole bunch of other reasons. And one of my favorite applications, this happened about 5 years ago. A small company, struggling company here in Silicon Valley called Keyhole. And they created a 3D virtual world, and it had no application. This 3D virtual world You start out in space, you see the Earth, you zoom into any location you wanted just by typing in the address. I thought it was such a fabulous way of exploring the world, going to places you've never been, and they couldn't raise a penny. And so I was so excited about the company, we put money into the company, and I went everywhere and showed that demonstration. I would tell people that this is the way we're going to do search someday. If you want to search for something, look for an address, you would type it in, and we would fly you there. And satellite images will continue to download, and before you know it, you're right there on the street, and you might even see some buildings. That small company was eventually purchased by Google and became Google Earth. Google Earth is now the single largest downloaded, most frequently downloaded application in the history of mankind. Over 200+ million downloads. So 3D graphics could be used for a lot more than video games. Now that vision, if you will, that perspective, was unique at the time and hard to sell. And so we had to go and explain it to venture capitalists who had to figure out whether the technology was going to be possible, how big was the market, because it was $0 billion at the time. So how do you extrapolate, how do you scope the size of a market when its apparent size was 0 at the time? And you look at analyst reports and you study market research, and all of it would say approximately 0. It would never show up. It's a non-category, a non-market. And so it's incumbent upon the venture capitalists and of course the founders to try to figure out how to inspire each other into doing something together. And so Sequoia Capital and Sutter Hill were our venture capitalists. And we got the company going with $2 million. Now, the question about perspective becomes very interesting in other opportunities in the company, other circumstances in the company. And let me give you some examples. Many years later, Sequoia Capital came to me and said, you know, there's a couple of kids at Stanford, and they have this thing, and it's an internet thing, and you just type in, what you're looking for, and it shows up, puts up the website. And I said, yeah, Yellow Pages. I mean, no duh, right? We use it, and there's a variety of versions of it on the web at the time. We use the internet just like everybody else to do FTP and also to visit various websites. And they said, should we invest in this company? And I said, there's no freaking way they're going to make money. That stuff is free. Right? And so they said, well, we can't figure it out ourselves, but it doesn't cost much to give them $1 million or $2 million. And they invested in a small company called, what eventually became Jerry's company, called Yahoo. Notice, although I had the perspective about one thing, I didn't have the perspective about something else. Just because you're a visionary doesn't mean you're a visionary about everything. Your perspective stems from your life experiences, what's commonsensical about you, what's interesting to you. And so that's important to realize that you have perspective too. Therefore, you have vision too. Now, what's interesting about these websites, like to follow on the Yahoo story, if you remember, there were several other searches out there. Alta Vista at the time, Excite at the time, Lycos at the time, right? And now the question is, they're all doing search, and they all did a reasonably good job. Now comes the question is, what was their perspective? How was their perspective different from one another? One website thought that they were a destination. Do you guys remember that? We would be a destination, kind of like a channel. Somebody said, in fact, since we're going to be a destination, we would serve up content. And therefore, the search part of it is a commodity. We'll outsource that. So all of the search engines, which started out as search, turned into destinations or portals, and they outsourced the search to someone else, which made it possible for Google to start. And so notice two companies doing exactly the same thing started with the exact same fundamental core technology ended up in radically different places because they had different perspectives. They saw the world different. So perspective matters, vision matters. Now in our industry, shortly after we were started, 3D graphics for PCs and consumer 3D graphics became the hottest thing. And so everybody in Silicon Valley was starting a 3D graphics company. We were, in 1993, the only consumer 3D graphics company in the world. Silicon Graphics up the street was the professional, if you will, 3D graphics company. By the end of a couple of years or so, 1995, there were probably 50, 70 startups doing exactly the same thing we were trying to do. And over time, we competed with about 200 companies. NVIDIA today is the only surviving computer graphics company in the world. And so the question is then, what happened? Competition is intense. Everybody has smart people. Everybody has money. We competed with IBM. We competed with HP. We competed with Silicon Graphics. We competed with Sony, 3DFX, S3, Cirrus Logic, big, small, international, local. We competed with companies all over the world. So the question is, what happened? I would argue that 300 companies armed with exactly the same technology, armed with exactly the same people, the company that wins, and let's say they all execute, and they did. With 300 companies, 50% of them are going to execute at any given point in time. And so the question is, why does one survive? Well, I think that it matters to have perspective, and let me give you some examples. I always believed that you need to understand the reason why your business works. What is the essence of your business? What makes it work? Now, the foundation of my business, at its core, is semiconductor technology. Here in Silicon Valley, we usually like to refer to semiconductor technology as Moore's Law. Moore's Law is not so much a physical law as it's a law of competition. It is a law of challenging engineers. It's a law almost of setting pace. And Moore's Law approximately gives you twice the performance every year or two. And so understanding the fundamental ingredient of our business improves by a factor of 2 every year, and simultaneously reduces in cost by a factor of 2 every year. The question is, what makes a survivable business? And so our first perspective was that 3D graphics was insatiable. It was insatiable. That if I made something twice as good every year, even if the customer never asked for it, even if the customer told us it was too expensive, even if the customer, when you went to float that product specification to them, told you that they're not interested, and in fact that was the case. I took our product spec to Dell and HP and IBM and Gateway, and they all told me it was too much money. You're well outside of the boundaries of what they were willing to pay for. When your customers all tell you not to do something, the question is then, what do you do? In our case, because we had this unique perspective that 3D graphics was insatiable, and Moore's Law was our friend, therefore, we should make our graphics processors twice as good every year. And so for the first 5 years of our company, we just turned off our blinders and said, we're going to ignore customers. Now, which one of you guys are going to go through your marketing courses, and the lesson that it teaches you is ignore your customers? Well, sometimes you have to ignore your customers. And the reason for that is because they don't know the nature of your business. And while the industry is being created, before there's common sense about the rules of that business, there is no way they can possibly know. And so I took the last few $1 million of the company's money and built a chip that is way too big. And our customers told us we were way out of bounds on cost, and they weren't going to buy any. Until the day we showed up with the processor, we were in allocation throughout the entire life of that project, until our next generation product, which was twice its price, cannibalize the previous one. And so we grew and grew and grew for several years. Then the question became, what now? Now you guys are going to learn that innovation is a rather dangerous thing. On the one hand, once you discover a great idea, you rinse and repeat, and you make that idea better and better and better. Whether it's a laptop computer that you guys have here, or a car, or a microprocessor, or in our case, a graphics processor, we made it better and better every year. At some point, it becomes good enough. Moore's Law is a wonderful thing. Semiconductor technology enables you to make amazing leaps and bounds in technology, and at some point, it becomes good enough. And so, this is probably in the late 90s, about 7 years into our company, maybe 6, 7 years into our company, I came to the conclusion that 3D graphics was not going to be sustainable as a accelerator or a fixed function device that renders texture maps and polygons on the screen. That we had to change the company to make the 3D graphics processor programmable so that it could be an artistic medium for expression. Now this is a weird word. Here we are, an engineering company, and we now want to change this chip to become an artistic expression, an artistic medium, so that all of the video games, so that all of the applications that were developed on our chip would be stylistically different. And we believed unless we could figure out a way to make the content richer and more interesting and stylistically different from one game developer to another game developer to another, we would limit the life of our medium. And if our medium reached its end, we as the world leader would also see our end. And so we decided to make the GPU programmable and make it a medium for artistic expression, and invented a technology called programmable shader. Almost every single video game that you guys see today has our fingerprint on it, whether it's a Xbox 360 or PS3 or any PC game today. You could see elements of what programmable shaders made possible. That started a whole new innovation curve for us and kept our industry vibrant. But the crossing from one generation of technology to the next generation almost killed the company. And so that process of reinventing the company, the perspective that led us to a new idea, also risks the company in the process. And those are interesting conversations that we can have. So there's perspective matters. When a company gets larger, you guys are going to learn that as the founder or as the CEO, you have to learn new things. And many of the new things that you'll learn has to do with I'm building products at first, and I've just talked to you about building products. Soon you'll be talking about and learning about building companies. And building companies means things that are soft and hard to explain, like building a company with a culture. What does that mean? How does the culture of one company different from a culture of another company? And why is it that this particular culture is better for your company and not for another? So the culture of a company is important to find out, to put your arms around and to create and develop. How do you organize? We were just talking earlier with one of the guys. Are you functionally organized? Are you organized in business units? How do you deal with multiple products and multiple geographies and multiple customers? And so that's the company building process. It's mechanical. It's interesting, lots of trial and error. It's organic, people matter, personalities matter. And if you guys are interested in talking about that, I'm happy to talk about that as well. And then I would say probably the most important thing above that is to realize that when you're building a company and building a product, skill matters. Intellect matters. Training matters. but it's not enough. The part of it that is important to realize about building companies is that it's a challenging and painful and oftentimes extraordinarily scary thing to do. And so unless you have passion, unless you really love the process of building the company and what you're trying to do, it's going to be incredibly, incredibly challenging. And so what I would leave you with is when you're building a company, if you decide to build a company, you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose that you're building the company for? Is it that you would like to build a company so that you can sell it, make a fortune? Is it that you would like to build a company so you can take it public? You're just a serial entrepreneur. You want to build something, let somebody else run it, build something, sell it. Whatever your reason is, be honest to yourself. Turns out that in my case, I just love the process of building things, and I love being part of something. You know, being part of NVIDIA and being part of a people and being part of a cause that is that's inspiring to me keeps me vibrant, and it's something that I'm willing to do for a very long period of time. And so I've been in it now for 16 years, and I've learned a lot in the process of being the CEO and the founder of the company. And so maybe the thing to do is, why don't I open it up now and let you guys ask me whatever type of questions you guys have. Yes, sir.
What did your investors say about your idea of reinventing your company to include programmable CPU?
And Jensen, can you please repeat
yes, I will.
the question?
The question is, what did our investors say about us taking the big risk of adding programmable shaders and reinventing that product category and reinventing our company? First of all, it's not a conversation you really have with your shareholders, but you do have a conversation with your management team first, your employees second, your board of directors third. Typically is the way, the process that I take. When you're in high tech, when you're in the technology industry, when the technology moves this fast, if you're not reinventing yourself, you're just slowly dying. You're just slowly dying, unfortunately, at the rate of Moore's Law, which is the fastest of any rate that we know, right? The compounded rate of Moore's Law is pretty unbelievable.
Successful product that was generating a lot of money.
I know, so it's scary. And so you have to, and this is, so the question is, we have a product that's generating a lot of money and it's very successful. How do you cannibalize it? There is a theory that if you don't cannibalize it, someone will, and it surely will be cannibalized. And so if you want to be a market leader, you have to take the initiative to cannibalize your own products and have your ideas cannibalize your own ideas. When we went from a fixed function graphics accelerator, a texture mapping engine for games like Quake 3 and Doom and those kind of games, to a programmable shading architecture, our first chip almost killed the company. It was called GeForce FX. I don't know if any of you have ever owned one of those. GeForce FX is a chip, is a processor that, you know, it's a baby only a mother can love. I mean, it's we took enormous chance in building GeForce FX, but it almost broke our back. But if we didn't build that chip, I am sure NVIDIA would be dead today. I am absolutely certain we'd be dead. It was one of the biggest gambles in our history. We had to create, instead of an API, we had to go to a processor with a language, we call it CG, and a compiler, so it's kind of like a processor. We introduced a new programming paradigm to the world that it never understood in the beginning. And so it took a lot of evangelism, a lot of marketing, a lot of education. But inventing CG took us to unbelievable places. And one of our most important work today is related to using GPUs for general purpose computing. And it's extraordinary, the results of what we're seeing. And it wouldn't have been possible, it wasn't because of CG that we started there. Okay, so you have to take these leaps. Questions? Yes, sir.
Some people sort of see that gaming is sort of moving more towards consoles and away from PCs.
Yeah.
Is it harder to make profit when you have to negotiate with Sony or Nintendo or whoever, some big company, than it would be when you sell individual cards?
Yeah. The economics of it, building anything, ultimately comes down to the amount of competition you have. You don't set the price, the competition sets the price. The market doesn't set the price, the competition does. And so if your competitor wishes to build PlayStation 3 as much as you do, then the economics will be challenging. And there you just need to decide, is it an economic decision for you? For example, there are rumors that we were not enthusiastic in building some of the game consoles, and we were more enthusiastic in building other game consoles. It came down to this for me. I think you have to realize what is the finite resource, what is the scarce resource that you have as a manager. The function of a manager is to allocate resources properly for the best return. And so if you think about our resource is the finite number of extraordinary engineers and how much time they have in a day to pursue whatever opportunities that are out there. Now, if the number of opportunities that are out there is less than my supply of engineers, so therefore demand is less than my supply, then obviously I'm very enthusiastic about it. But if it's the other way around, then the opportunity to build a game console at terrible economics, or any project at terrible economics, is simply not worth it. And so I look at it irrespective of competition. The competition sets the price, but then I get to decide whether I want to engage in that project or not. You are in charge of your own company as the CEO. And so we decide whether it's economic. And once you decide, then it is what it is. So you have to be thoughtful about what is your critical resource. Do you have more of it or less of it than the market demands? Do you have more opportunity or less opportunity than your resource can support? And then what's the appropriate return on that investment? Thinking about not just your cost, but more importantly, your opportunity cost. And so we look at it from that perspective every single time.
Can you tell us a little bit about the culture that you try to set at NVIDIA?
Yeah, that's a good question. The question is, can I talk about the culture that we're trying to set at NVIDIA? At the core of our company's success is innovation. Now, a lot of companies say innovation is important to their company. Invention is important to their company. However, I don't believe you can fundamentally say that innovation, that you want as a CEO to nurture the spirit of innovation, to encourage innovation, unless you have a culture of risk-taking. We have to encourage our engineers, our marketing people, all of our employees, to take calculated risks. In order to encourage them to take calculated risks, first of all, you have to teach them how to do that. That's a skill, a matter of skill. Then the second part of it is a matter of courage. Most people hate to fail. Do you guys agree with that? Well, unless you guys want to be successful, let me say it the positive way. If you want to be successful, I would encourage you to grow a tolerance for failure. To develop a tolerance for failure. Now, when I mean a tolerance for failure, I don't mean, gee, what Jensen just told me is sleep in until noon, okay? Don't do any of my homework, flunk out of all my classes because that defines failure. Right? That's not what I said. What I said is, what I'm trying to say is that I want you to try things even though it is impossible to calculate precisely that it would lead to success. That your instincts, your intuition is something you ought to follow. If it wasn't because of following my own instincts or the founder's instincts or many of our employees' instincts, why would we be where we are today? And why would we have invented things that the market's never had before, the world's never had before? So you have to have this culture or tolerance for risk-taking. But the thing about failure is this: if you fail often enough, you actually might become a failure. And that's different than being successful. And so the question is, how do you teach someone how to fail, but fail quickly? And to change courses as soon as you know it's a dead end. And the way to do that is we call it intellectual honesty. We assess on a continuous basis whether something makes sense or not. And if it's the wrong decision, let's change our mind. And you know, a lot of people say CEOs are always right and they never change their mind. That doesn't make any sense at all to me, especially when it violates the first principles of what we want the company to become. An innovative company that invents amazing things, that solves problems for the world that it sometimes didn't even know it had. If you want to do that, then you have to cultivate that tolerance for risk-taking, and you have to then teach people how to fail, but fail quickly and inexpensively, and how to be direct with each other that this is the wrong approach and what's the better approach, and then be flexible enough to change courses and quick. And so that type of culture, if you will, in today's, if you guys were to start a company and you were building a website with an internet service of some kind, internet-based service of some kind, with the competition coming from all over the world, and it's 24/7, and ideas take no time to experiment, and a particular website or a particular company could be throwing ideas out into the world 20 a day. And so unless you are thoughtful about risk-taking and being able to change your mind, reacting to the market conditions, and being flexible, how are you going to stay alive? And so you could almost see what I just described in the nature of older companies and the nature of the newer companies. The modern companies, if you guys, I'm sure you guys all go to Google's website, almost every single application's in beta form. They're trying all kinds of stuff, right? They're trying all kinds of stuff. If they call it production and it doesn't work well, you guys would just be upset at them. So they call it beta. Have you noticed? They call it beta so that they could try a lot of things. And if it fails, take it out. If it's bad, take it out. If it works, do more. And so innovation requires a little bit of experimentation. Experimentation requires exploration. Exploration will result in failure. Unless you have a tolerance for failure, you would never experiment. And if you don't ever experiment, you would never innovate. If you don't innovate, you don't succeed. You'll just be a dweeb. That's it. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How did you choose your co-founders and conditions?
Don't ever go into business with anyone you don't deeply trust. And they were two of my closest colleagues, and I trust them completely. And they're wonderful friends even today. So, by the way, as a CEO, selecting people is 99% of the job.
What applications do you see driving demand in the general purpose, which is like, what's going to be like the next big thing this industry?
So the question is, what do I see driving the demand for this thing that we're pushing right now called GPU computing, using the GPU for much more than just graphics. For graphics, there's a model of graphics that we call computational graphics. So it's using programs to generate the images. The algorithms are no longer cast in the silicon. The algorithms are actually software. And it could be ambient occlusion, it could be ray tracing, it could be all kinds of interesting algorithms that people are going to explore for the future. We observed, and it was in fact, this is to give you another example of innovation, with Stanford is fabulous. When we invented GeForce FX, although it wasn't a very successful GPU for graphics, researchers around the world noticed that it had a programming language called CG, C for graphics, and that you could program this GPU to do other things aside from graphics. And it had 32-bit floating point, IEEE compatible 32-bit floating point. And so some smart researchers, many of them were here at Stanford, just bought a graphics card from Fry's and started writing programs. And they discovered that if they really worked hard and do all these these algorithmic gymnastics, they could get something, an algorithm, it could be nanomolecular dynamics, it could be computational fluid dynamics, to run 20 times faster. And they couldn't believe it. How do you speed up an application 20 times? Well, the interesting observation that we made is that we speed up 3D graphics applications, which is basically something you can do in software, 1,000 times over a CPU all the time. So what if we took all of those parallel processors that were inside our GPUs and make it completely programmable and expose it through a programming language called C, right? C, and now in the near future C++. Imagine the type of problems we could help solve. And so whether it's weather prediction or seismic analysis or taking your CT scans and reconstructing the human image, the body from it, all kinds of very computationally intensive applications we could accelerate 50 times, 100 times. Now just to put it in perspective, 100 times is in Moore's law time approximately 10 years. Now to put 10 years worth of computing resources in the hands of scientists, researchers, engineers, unbelievable benefits. And so the risk was really large, however, to make our GPU even more general purpose, because every time you make something general purpose, you know what, right? A Swiss Army knife? It's dangerous because whenever you make something general purpose or a Swiss Army knife-like, you move away from your core business. It's much, much better to have a very specific niche, to have intense focus on a particular market segment. And you guys will learn all of this in marketing. When you make something general purpose, you're all things to all people, you become, what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none. Very, very dangerous move. Now, we thought that it was just too important for us not to do it, so we decided to make that move. And it's fabulous results. Okay, so those are some of the things that we're seeing now. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned joining the co-founders of NVIDIA. So, especially in the initial stage, how can you find each of your in the company, and how can you distribute the profit?
Okay, so her question is, we were friends in the beginning, we're friends now. How do we figure out who's the right position, and how do we distribute the profits? Okay, and so I won't say anything funny just so I'm not misunderstood, but all of our pay were identical, and we all had identical share in the company. So that's just simply fairness. Now the question becomes governance. There's the part of it which is equity. Equity is another way of saying what's fair, right? So we all had the same salary. All three of us were making $100,000 a year, okay? And we all had a percentage of the company, equal percentage. Now, you can't run a company, though. You can't build a great company when you have three people who has to vote on everything and with equal share of responsibilities. You simply can't. That becomes a leadership question. That becomes a governance question. That becomes a management question, right? That becomes a question about building a great company. I don't recall exactly the conversation, but I think it kind of went like this. All right, Jensen, you're the CEO, right? Okay, that was done. That was basically the process. I think that some people are you know, I'm not particularly, but from a personality perspective, I'm not particularly outgoing. And so that's not a necessity for being a good CEO. But as a personality, I've always been able to see around the corners, if you will. I can see around the fuzzy edges. And I think CEOs and leaders need to be comfortable with ambiguity. Ambiguity meaning that, you know, what does the future look like? Well, it's hard to say. Some people hate that. Some people just say, Jensen, tell me what you need to have done and with how much resource and by when. Okay? Some people rather me tell them that, hey, look, there's this opportunity out there, not sure what it is, not sure how big it is, but it kind of feels like this. Let's go figure it out and let's build a business. Some people are very comfortable with that. And so this ambiguity is important to be comfortable with, I guess. And I think that all CEOs that are very successful are comfortable with ambiguity. And I am very comfortable with ambiguity. Yes?
Yeah. What percentage of your initial investment was yours? Like, how do you get the rest? And also, like, how many times was your proposal for help with the investment was rejected?
Mm-hmm. So I was 30 years old, and I'd never taken a single business class, and I've never taken any marketing classes, and I've never used at the time it wasn't PowerPoint, it was called Persuasion. On the Mac, it was called Persuasion, and so I bought a Mac so I could use Persuasion, and then I tried to create a company presentation to take it to venture capitalists. The process kind of went like this. We started, my first official day of work was my 30th birthday, February 17th. And we got the company funded. And so once we got started, the question is, what are we going to do? You know, how does it all work out? How do we start the company? And so we met every day, the three of us, in one of the founders' townhouse in Fremont. And we would get together, and there would be nothing to do. I mean, what do? You got three guys get together, you just talk, you know? So what did you guys do last night? You know, what did you have for dinner? I mean, so you talk about that for about 6 months, okay? And the big event of the day would be, hey, where do you guys want to go for lunch? And so, you know, Philly cheesesteak today, or, you know, Chinese food tomorrow, or whatever. That would be like a big deal. And then after a while, it was like, could you put some donuts in the fridge in the morning for when we come? I mean, so that would be a big deal for a while. And so that lasted for a few months, just the three of us like that. I know it sounds pathetic, but it's true. Because at that time, I'm reading about books on how to start companies, and I'm trying to figure out, you know, how to go raise money, and, you know, what's a venture capitalist, and how do you incorporate the company, and so, those kind of things. Pretty soon, I met a lawyer, went to a law firm called Cooley Godward, and they helped us incorporate the company. The amount of money that he says, you know, we need some money from you so that we could price the shares and also to incorporate the company. So he says, how much money do you have in your pocket? I said, $200. So he says, okay, give me $200. I gave him $200. And for $200, I bought 15%, I think it was 20% of NVIDIA. So it was a good deal. Yeah, 20%, yeah. And then I went back to the house, and then I went back to the condo, and they both gave me $200, and they both got 20%. And that's how it worked, literally. Yeah, it's not much more. You know, here's the thing. NVIDIA, I never finished my business plan. I know it. I know it. We never finished a business plan. Never could figure out how to finish a business plan, to tell you the truth. And if I would have finished that book, and I went to Borders and got Gordon Bell's book, How to Start a High-Tech Company. It's like this thick. If I would have read the whole thing, I would have been dead now. we would have run out of money, ran out of time. And so I read the first 3 or 4 chapters, and I got to go to work. Yeah, so I incorporated the company. They introduced us to 2 venture capitalists, and I just went to their office and told them what I'd like to do. The thing that gets the company funded, and when you get to that point, you just have to remember a few things. VCs don't invest in business plans because business plans are easy to write. I couldn't write it, but other people could, right? And so they invest in this. They invest in great people. And so the question is, do they trust you? Your reputation matters. Your history matters. Because I had done so much work with Andy Bechtolsheim, which was another graduate of Stanford, and the founder of Sun, and worked with the founders of Synopsys and LSI Logic, and we were all very successful and we did good work. Your reputation will precede you, even if your business plan writing skills are inadequate. And the second thing is, you need to have a vision that's sufficiently large to invest in, because their statistics, their probability of success is rather low. And if they need to put in $10 million, if the market's only $20 million large, they'll never get that $10 million back with reasonable return. But if it's a $200 billion market, then of course it's a rather different thing. Okay, so the size of the market. And they want to know that at least there is a clever idea that the market has never done before. So that last part is probably second, last. I said it last because also I think it's the least important. You might have to reinvent yourself over time. And if you want to reinvent yourself, you need to have great people. That's why great people are so important. Yes, sir.
Who were some of the people that you considered to be your mentors when you were getting started, and what was some of the best advice that you got?
So the question is, who were some of the mentors, and what were the best advice I got? I truly believe that if you want to be successful, a successful habit is to have the capacity and the willingness to learn from just about anybody. And I do. I learn from just about anybody. And it could be a little thing, it could be a big thing. If it wasn't because of my kids, I would miss the whole internet age. I would have missed YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, and so you need to know that the world changes, and you want to be able to learn from just about anybody. And so I'm surrounded with extraordinarily talented executives and professionals of all walks of life. And so you just have to make sure that you're willing to learn from just about anybody. Some of the great advice that I've had over the years: focus, laser beam focus. Don't do too much. Do a few things well, and do it with extraordinary intensity. Focus matters. If you look at what I do with my time, I wake up in the morning and the first thing of my time is NVIDIA, and the last thing I do is NVIDIA, and I do that 24/7. And if I can figure out a way to do that for another 50 years, we're going to be a good company. Yes, ma'am.
Successful entrepreneur as well. So what's your greatest challenge is your ambiguity as CEO your best and worst estimation of the future of you and your company?
Okay. So her question is, she started out by saying that I'm a successful entrepreneur, and what are my biggest challenges now? And considering that I like ambiguity, what's my best estimate of the future for the company and for myself? The biggest challenge with building a company is the reinvention of the company. Every successful thing needs to be torn down at some point and be rebuilt. It is unfortunate but true. And the reason for that is because the technology either gets good enough, and therefore you have to reinvent, and sometimes the invention process is disruptive. sometimes it's in fact destructive. And it could destroy what you had built in the past. And so the reinvention process is very challenging, it's gut-wrenching, it takes a lot of courage, and it really tests your conviction. In the technology industry, reinventing the company every 10 years is almost a necessary thing. So that's, when I say challenging, I don't mean bad challenging, I think that's fun challenging. I love the process of reinvention. Okay, so that's fun challenging. What's my best forecast for our company? I think that NVIDIA has the opportunity to become one of the most important technology companies in the world. And I hope that it does. And my best forecast for me is that I am 80 years old and I'm here talking to students, and I hope I'm still the CEO. Yes, sir.
Questions about the first few years of the startup were critical. You have to put your cash into positive, constant cash flow, cash king. So your NVIDIA can how to manage that.
Yes, so the gentleman's question has to do with, in the beginning, survival is important, cash is king. Just so that there's no ambiguity about this, survival is always important, cash is always king. And so as the CEO, you're either making money, saving money, or raising money. And if you're not making money, raising money, and saving money, you ought to be doing those three things. Just stay focused on those three things. And so during the beginning, in the early days, I was raising money all the time. As soon as I was done raising this round of money, I got to raise more money. You know, you're always raising money. Just maybe there was a week break in between, but I was raising money all the time. As a startup, you're always going out of business, right? That's the definition of a startup, an enterprise that is nearly out of business all the time. That's the definition of a startup. Question? Yes, ma'am.
After the leadership succession,
well, because I want this, the question is, how do I deal with leadership succession as a CEO and for our company? Well, I want this job until I'm 80, I just said. No, I'm just kidding. One of the primary roles of a CEO, in order to grow the company, in order to make NVIDIA one of the most important technology companies in the world and make significant contribution to society, in order to do that, you have to cultivate new leaders so that they can have new ideas and grow new businesses and you know, maybe run a different geography, run a new different product line. And so I spend most of my time these days, sitting with our general managers and sitting with our leaders and helping them think through strategies and helping them think through challenges and helping them think through product roadmaps and helping them think through transitions and, you know, team building, organization creation, you know, how to manage, how to create processes that last the test of time. So you know, these things are lessons that I'm supposed to pass on, and I do, and I spend a lot of my time doing that. I believe this, that succession planning by a priori picking out 3 people that the board should consider in the case that I get run over by a bus is a toxic process. I know that it has been thought of as a methodology of succession planning, but I think it's just very toxic for the environment because everybody's trying to figure out who got selected and who didn't. I think that it's a much better process to focus on ultimately developing the next generation of leaders so that in the case that something happens where I'm not the right CEO anymore, there are many choices for the board to choose from, including outside. So those are, I think the company building process, focusing on that is the positive way of thinking about succession planning. A good question. How about I take one question and that's it? Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if a good question, but
It's okay.
I think that is a problem with Latin America.
Any question from our Latino crowd here is fabulous.
And I am a little, I have many friends who are engineers. They have many brilliant ideas, but they don't feel motivated because they don't have money, and they were looking for people who could make these ideas real, and they are only working for other people, and they don't realize that I don't know what to see that is the problem.
Well, first of all, so her, I think, let me see if I can paraphrase the question. You know friends who have a lot of ideas, but they also have a lot of money, and so they don't really feel that motivated to do something with those ideas. First of all, money. I hope that if I leave you with anything, money is the only singular reason not to start the company. Because starting companies it's a very, very unlikely probability for success. And so if you're looking for, if that is your reason for doing it, you will likely regret the experience. You should start the company and build a company because you so believe in your idea, you're so passionate about it, and you want to build something great. The only reason you want to do it. It just comes along. It's fine. I have plenty of money, but it doesn't motivate me, nor does it demotivate me, because it wasn't. So I would urge you to ask yourself, and for your friends to ask themselves, what is the purpose that they want to start a company? Ideas are a dime a dozen. There's so many ideas. If you want ideas, you're going to get a lot of ideas in this room. And so ideas don't really matter. You have to have a perspective that's unique, that you feel really strongly about it, that you're willing to persevere almost any challenge